right, we're thrilled to welcome back Deputy Lacey Nelson. Hi, Lacey.
Hi.
Of course, she's in the other room this time.
I'm sequestered.
Social distancing.
Man.
Because in the main studio with Dawn and I, social distancing 6 feet
Yes.
apart. The Sheriff, Scott Jones, thanks for being here.
Good morning. I'm Lacey's driver this morning.
This is Sacramento County Sheriff. So obviously, we just remind people that when Sheriff Jones is speaking, you're speaking from the Sac County perspective.
Correct.
We got a lot of law enforcement questions, though, and people are concerned about a lot of things. I thought we'd start you and I were talking off the air in my office. What's your general message about what we're going through right now?
Well, I guess at this point it's one of calm. I guess people need to know that there is some enforcement capabilities behind these orders, whether it's a county order, state order, one of the national recommendations. But I think law enforcement in general, and of course I'm Sacramento County Sheriff's Office, but I think I can speak for law enforcement when I say that we really don't want to enforce the order. Enforcement's not our real thrust right now. We're just trying to educate folks on why there is an order, what is essential and what is non essential, and trying to get people to kind of stay at home, social distance when they're out, that type of thing. Just kind of calm fears and allay a lot of rumors.
What does that look like in the field? Are your deputies going up to people in groups? Are you pulling people over and asking, what are you doing out?
We're not, and I've directed my folks, and it's true in Sac County, and like I said, I think generally it's true in law enforcement. We're not predicating any vehicle stops on just to find out whether someone has any sort of paperwork or justification for being out if their work is if their work is. I know that old joke, right? Your
Show me
papers are
your
not in order. But I know some employers are giving their folks paperwork to show that they're essential. So none of that is required. Now, you still may get stopped for the same old reasons you got stopped for before, but it won't be generally predicated on with whether trying to determine whether what you're doing is essential.
And if you get pulled over for whatever it is, running a stop sign, it's likely the deputy is going to ask, why are you out?
Maybe, maybe not. They may ask, but if they ask, it'll be from a position of a point of education, right? So if they say, hey, what are you doing out? They might ask, and you'd say, well, I'm going to do whatever. Or if they'd say, okay, well, do you understand that there's a stay-at-home order? It'd be more of education. We haven't done any enforcement. We haven't written any tickets. We hope we don't have to. But I think most people are doing the right thing for the right reasons.
Lacey, what are you hearing from fellow deputies and such that are out there and what's going on in terms of because we get all these anecdotal stories, we can't tell what's what. Sometimes people are saying it's dead out there. Other times people are saying people aren't complying with what's going on.
I've talked to my buddies who still working in patrol, and everything's the same for them. They've said calls for service are the same, the amount of calls, the types of calls. It's still basically the same climate out there. I don't think much has changed that way.
Have you, Sheriff? I saw your first press conference when this started, and somebody asked you about domestic violence.
Yeah.
Have you seen, because so many of us are trapped at home, have you seen an uptick in that at all?
We haven't. Our calls for service are down slightly, about 2.5%. So really not noticeable to the average deputy on the street. One thing that's down considerably is home burglaries, right? Everybody's home.
Exactly.
A burglar loves an empty home, and there just is not
Right.
that many of them out there. So the officers, and we have full staffing. In fact, we have over full staffing because a lot of deputies that had vacations planned are, like most of us, not going on vacation, so they're out working. And so they're using a lot of that downtime to, try and be proactive. And what's different now is they're being proactive with businesses, right? Open and closed. Open have their own unique set of circumstances. The patrons want to feel safe. The businesses want to feel protected. But certainly the closed businesses, they're already being kind of victimized economically by this. We want to try and, not add to that burden by having them be burglarized while they're closed. So we're doing a lot of patrolling on the open and closed businesses as well.
Is there more? We've heard from various agencies around the area. Is there more use of the helicopter as well to be looking at businesses within Sac County? Because we're hearing that from other agencies.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the helicopter's always up, and we have a cooperative flight schedule with Sacramento Police. We're the two agencies that have helicopters, so we're kind of a regional asset for all the other smaller agencies. But yeah, we are up as much as we always have to help the officers primarily for their calls for service, but also in their downtime, they're doing the same sorts of things.
What about, so we go back to the domestic violence thing, just because it's in my mind. You probably heard there was a horrible incident in Phoenix where an officer was killed last night responding to, it wasn't typical husband-wife, I think it was roommates that were not getting along and wound up shooting one of the officers. Is there a difference in the way your officers are interacting with the public?
Well, specific to domestic violence, that's always our number one. That's the number one cause of concern for officer injuries or death. Vehicle stops being number two. So we are always cautious with that. So those are always two officer calls. which can be a little bit challenging. We're trying to not have as many two-person units, which makes it convenient for two-person calls, but we're trying to do that. We've also shifted kind of our briefing schedule. So if we have a swing shift briefing at 2, for example, half show up at 2, half show up at 3, and that is so if and when we do have an outbreak in our ranks, if we have to reverse engineer it, there won't be as much exposure to test, and hopefully that it might not affect as many folks inside of our department.
I'm just making an assumption here. A lot of times, when we had Lacey on before, we're usually talking about happier things. And one of the things that people are always asking about, I do a lot of ride-alongs with Sac Sheriff. I assume those are suspended indefinitely.
Correct.
We're not taking the public out in these times.
No, we're not.
Of social distance. Now, you mentioned that you're fully staffed. Obviously, we are not New York. But just as recently as Friday, 500 more cops called in sick. The NYPD is now without 11% of its officers. Wow. What are you doing to protect against that?
Well, a number of things, and it's easy to look at the stats from New York City and extrapolate them to the country and just have fear and panic. But the reality is that's its own sort of hotspot. I mean, so you have almost 40,000 officers in New York City, so it's reasonable to assume that a percentage of them, either through their work or through their normal social discourse, are going to come down with it. I'm not naive enough to think that we won't get our cases. In fact, we have our first case, an officer that is positive. But not from the job, and he's been out of the job for a little while, kind of self-isolating because his wife is in the medical profession, and she got it first. But I'm not naive enough to think that we can't get it. So we've done a number of things. As I mentioned in the briefing, we've also equipped them with protective equipment, so either gowns, masks, or gloves. We ask our call takers and dispatchers ask relevant questions, whether they have symptomology or they're positive for COVID or they refuse to answer. All of those answers have relevance for the officers that are responding to a call. We're trying to ask folks, if the call permits it, to come outside, maintain that social distancing. And it's not always just so the officers don't get it, but our officers are young and healthy, so they could be asymptomatic carriers, which is why we have this lockdown in the first place. We don't want to inadvertently give it to any of our vulnerable populations where we're doing calls for service. So we're having to go through, I make each patrol team report every day how much protective equipment they go through, gloves, masks, and gowns, just so I can gauge burn rate so we can make sure we stay ahead of supplies. We've gotten deliveries of thousands of masks. We have plenty of supplies, hand sanitizers and things like that. So just trying to equip them with the information they need to stay safe, trying to socially distance them among themselves and the public as much as possible, and then giving them the equipment they need at the end of at their calls for service.
Gosh, that's a lot. That's a lot. I mean, already there's a lot on their mind, I'm sure, with calls.
Well, like I mentioned,
and then you add this in.
I never had less on my calendar and worked harder in my life. So,
man, yeah.
We got Sheriff Scott Jones from Sac County here, of course, Deputy Lacey Nelson as well. Phone number is 888-989-9811. Let's go back to kind of what you alluded to in the beginning. We get a lot of emails like this one that came in and said and this came in last week. It still applies. The governor is saying we might need to be sheltered in place for 8 to 12 weeks. Remember, Governor Newsom last week said, hey, this could be a 3-month idea. This person's question is, how in the hell is that going to happen without the National Guard getting involved? When you step back from a law enforcement perspective, he's asking more of a human question, and Brandon on our show was talking about earlier this morning, the pent-up cabin fever thing that now after Trump's announcement yesterday, we're going through April 30th nationally.
Right.
How real is that, and what about this question of are we going to have guards in the street?
Well, I mean, I think we hope for the best and prepare for the worst. I mean, we've already been locked down. I use the word lockdown, although it's not quite a lockdown, in an unprecedented fashion, right? You have the whole country doing something that they've never been asked to and never had to do. And so actually it's gone better than I expected it to. Now, you're right. As it goes further, these pent-up aggressions. I mean, I have 2 teenage boys at home from school that are into sports, and they have no outlet for their testosterone.
God.
So it's a challenge to try and keep them entertained and us from killing each other, figuratively, not literally. So I get it, but I don't necessarily believe that we'll need the National Guard, at least for the enforcement piece. I mean, right now my job is several-fold, but one of the I think the important aspects of my job is to try and maintain a sense of calm, project a sense of calm for the community, to say, look, we've got this. We've still got our cops out there. We'll still come if you need us. We still have the same types of calls for service, as Lacey mentioned, and we got this. And so I think it'd be a great elevation and escalation, I suppose, to put the National Guard in. But that being said, they're already in our communities doing food banks and food deliveries and humanitarian type stuff like you might see them doing in another country if they have a natural disaster. So it would not be a huge stretch. They'd be great partners if we needed them. So we have that resource available to us. But I still don't see, even if it's extended for another 30 days, I don't see them needed for the enforcement piece.
We ask everybody that we've been having coming on the same question from a human element. Lacey, I'll start with you. Where's your mindset over what's going on? Are you of the we're going to get through this, but I just don't know how? Are you scared? I mean, to what element is this affecting you personally?
I'm always of the mindset we're always just going to get through it. I mean, our country has been through a lot worse. Look at 9/11. You know, that's been in our lifetime, and we made it through that. We're going to make it through this. I see people are really coming together, which shows the good side of who we are as a country, and uniting and really stepping up and helping one another out, doing good deeds for other people. And, you know, yeah, is it scary? Yeah, this is scary for sure. This is the unknown. That's why it's scary. And, you know, people are susceptible to illness and they're sick and we don't have the resources. This is a scary thing, but I'm trying to just reassure people that we are going to get through this. We will make it through this, and we'll look back and go, gosh, I'm glad we got through that as well as we did.
Sheriff Jones, how long have you been in law enforcement?
31 years.
I know we were talking a little bit off the air. Do you recall a time like this?
Never with this type of sort of staying in place. 9/11 was mentioned. It was definitely a weird time after that, and kind of polarizing together. But nothing like this. This is truly. I know the media always uses the word, but it truly is unprecedented.
It's like we're asking. We've been asked to do something. We're being asked to not be as busy. and
Right.
we all, and everyone is so used to their calendars being filled up. And I mean, the positives that I've seen, like with some friends, is they have a lot more time with their kids that they didn't have before. And they're doing a lot of family stuff together, playing games or in their own front or backyard doing sports. You know, it's just this time that they didn't have before. And they're kind of really like, whoa, they're relishing it. They're loving it. And so I don't know, the positive I hope when we get through this is that we keep a little bit of that, you know, and just don't go completely back to having calendars so full we don't really get to concentrate on those relationships.
Well, I mean, I asked my undersheriff, I said, what did we used to do 3 weeks ago that was so important? I mean, what?
Right.
Because now it's all COVID all the time, right? I mean, what was so important that we filled up our days every single day? And so hopefully, you know, as you mentioned, when this gets in our rearview mirror, you know, we'll have nothing left but the T-shirts to remember it. But, you know, if you look at social media, there's tons of funny memes and stuff on there. So I think people are making the best of it. There's an underlying bit of angst and anxiety, but I think people are making the best of it.
We got this nice note, rad@radradio.com from Jacob. Says, this is just a random note, but this sheriff is so well-spoken and comfortable. It's nice to hear a cop with his wits about him. I'm in Reno, and I can only hope my sheriffs are this calm, cool, and collected.
That's very, very generous. Thank you.
Phone number is 888-989-9811. Hi, Jason.
Hi, good morning, guys.
Hey.
I wanted to say thank you for your services out there. My question is, I am a construction worker. I'm a painter, and I'm out with the public, and I only have a crew of 2, but I was wondering, is that considered essential work?
Well, first of all, I think law enforcement in general, certainly us in the sheriff's office, and we're a large agency. We're the largest agency in Northern California. My position is I don't want to be in the position of determining what businesses are essential. I think those businesses can make those decisions for their own, on their own. And if there is some dispute or some disagreement, because there's a lot of people that call us and say, hey, this business is still open, then it's a county health officer or the appropriate state agencies that decide what is essential. So what has happened in our case, and probably most counties, is we get information or you have a question and the health officer would kind of educate and say, look, what are you doing? Why is this essential? But I think right now, most folks are making the appropriate decisions for their own businesses and their own industries. And there's been very little need to intervene. I mean, I've seen things like car washes open, and I kind of wonder if that's essential.
Same.
I've seen adult-oriented stores.
Yeah, that's essential.
I think, okay, that's what I was going to say. I originally thought, what the heck? And I thought, okay, well, maybe that's essential.
But you're not sending deputies to bang on the door and say, what are you doing?
I think law enforcement generally is not the big enforcers, at least in this region, probably even in Reno and the Bay Area, all in California for sure. It's more the health department. But I think it has been so far that has likely been more self-regulating. So
this is probably a similar answer. Chris wrote in and said, is mobile dog grooming considered an essential job? I've read yes and no. Maybe you know someone that can answer. My understanding is pet care has been put under the allowable, but it's still a personal decision, right?
Yeah, I think it is a personal decision. And, obviously the gun stores and there's big debates. And that is the number one question we get. What businesses are essential and not? And again, I just stress, I think folks can make their own decision based on the importance of their industry, the importance of their employees, the safety of their own employees. And even if you're in an essential or something deemed essential or allowable as essential, you may still make the decision to close down based on what's best for you, your community, or your employees. So I think everybody's kind of making those decisions for their own businesses right now. If there's large swaths, then maybe the either nationally or statewide, they make those determinations on large swaths of industries. But other than that, I think folks are making their own determination right now. And again, I think it's kind of working. I mean, I can make the value judgment just as a human being. Gosh, that really doesn't seem necessary. But that's not my call at this point. And I think largely the stay-at-home order is working.
Have you guys seen at all an uptick in reasons why they shouldn't be calling you? We get anecdotal stories from various police departments around the country saying, don't call 911 if you're out of toilet paper or anything like that.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that can be an emergency, but, I was able to find toilet paper yesterday. I didn't hoard in the beginning. I thought it was silly, but then I just kind of ran out. I'm like, hey, it would be time to get toilet paper. I can't get any. But I was able to get some yesterday. So, but yeah, you're right. Folks shouldn't forget that we still have the same type of job responsibilities as we always have. So there's still people acting silly and crazy, and people committing crimes and trying to victimize others. So we're still responding to that type of thing, in addition to trying to deal with this coronavirus issues at all. So don't call 911 unless, as always, it's a life-threatening critical emergency or crime in progress. In Sacramento County, probably the same in many counties, we have what's 311. So you can call 311, get right to the county health officer and say, hey, I don't think this person is, out doing essential business, or I don't think this business is, for those types of things. But
still don't call that one for toilet paper.
Well, you can. That's the county side. That doesn't affect me. Yeah, so and a lot of agencies are kind of stepping up. I know we're trying to put together a partnership, a little too early to talk about it, with a supermarket chain to try and help with deliveries to some at-risk stay-at-home folks.
Nice.
So there's a lot of that going on as well. So I think just paying attention to the local social media of whatever law enforcement entity that has jurisdiction over you will help you get that good information.
Something else we're getting a lot of calls and questions about, and you were mentioning misinformation and the fear that's out there. But does this fall under that heading? People are wondering, are you arresting fewer people that you should be? They see stories about prisoners being let out of jail. What's the truth within both of those things?
So I guess there's a little bit of truth in all of that. For my officers, and again, we have about 1,500 officers. We're one of the largest sheriff's departments in the country. I've given my officers the discretion on discretionary arrest, right? If there's an in-progress crime or something like that, they're still going to arrest the people they need to arrest. But if it's discretionary, if there's, for example, a warrant that they can set a new court date for, a misdemeanor where they can cite someone out in the field, and I'm giving them the discretion to be a little bit more judicious, balancing factors of safety and the possibility of introducing COVID into our jails, all those factors when they decide to make an arrest. On the early release piece, we have been hit by that. I think the public defender, the ACLU certainly has seized this as an opportunity for yet to release more folks early. So we just got served with an order to release everyone with a sentence of 60 days or less. So we've just finished the process of releasing almost 500 inmates from our jail. And I think that's going on all over the place, which is interesting if you blame COVID, because we have no COVID cases in our jail. We've done a lot of different things to try and keep it from our jail. So you're saying that for their safety, you're taking them from a space with no known cases and putting them into the community with a certain rate that no one really even knows what it is, and claiming it's for their safety. And so it's unfortunate. Well, that's it's like I've told people, look, I'm a one-trick pony. It's public safety. Is it good for public safety? No, it's not. So I get it. There's a lot of other factors. The DA has their, they have court deadlines and all the courts are shut down. So how do they get people arraigned in their constitutional time frame? There's a lot of different interests in it. But again, my interest is public safety.
What about just the one-on-one fact that in general, your deputies are not often coming in contact with the cleanest, best people, and they might have to chase somebody. I mean, at what point does COVID go out the window and it's like, well, I got to chase this guy down and tackle him? And
every
now
day.
what?
I mean, every day it does. And so, I mean, these are the cops everywhere. We're wired to get bad guys. That's what we do. We catch bad guys.
Thank you.
So I appreciate that. So we're not going to stop doing that. So there's a lot of people that get booked in. We get 100 people booked in every day at our jail. So people are still getting booked in. It's just those kind of discretionary peripheral type things that we have the discretion maybe to put that off.
Here's an interesting question. We've got a deputy, Scott Jones from Sac Sheriff Department, and Lacey Nelson's here as well. I'm sorry, you're sheriff. She's deputy. I twitch that.
I've been called worse.
You guys know your titles. This is from Jessica. She says, what is the best thing to do in this time if you see a Corona party taking place?
Oh, my God.
My neighbors had one over the weekend. I live in Reno, but I was unsure if I should do anything. And if so, what should I do? This has become more anecdotal, where people are having parties intentionally to see if they can give each other the damn coronavirus.
You gotta be kidding me.
Started in Kentucky, then we had Connecticut was reported, and now apparently this
I saw one. Was it in Florida where actually several people that went to the Corona party came down with coronavirus?
Oh, my God.
I don't understand that.
Is that a reason to call law enforcement?
Well, I think it could be a reason to call law enforcement because I think they are the enforcement piece of people just being idiots have increased. I mean, you saw a guy that was surfing down at in L.A. somewhere, Redondo Beach or somewhere. They got a ticket. It was on the news last night for $1,000. He was the only. I mean, the beaches are closed. He's out there surfing. I mean, what an idiot! He deserves it. I mean, he should get an idiot fine.
Absolutely.
And so, I think the Corona parties fall under that. So that is definitely something that I think enforcement might be appropriate for.
Here's a similar question. So unfortunately, this is a little more common than we'd all like it to be. Name withheld says this weekend my neighbor had a small party. And when I asked him about it the following day, he said they had 10 people and everyone was 6 feet apart. But what are the legalities of people holding social events on their own property?
Well, it's difficult to enforce that, right? I think these are mostly just suggestions, requests, asks. Look, this is the way to keep most people safe. And so they have the groups of 2 in certain circumstances, or groups of 6 or groups of 10. But people are going to have to kind of self-regulate. And the thing people have to understand is, look, okay, we understand that the at-risk groups are older Americans that have, or folks that might have compromised immune systems or damaged lungs in some way. So, okay, I'm young. I don't need to worry about it. I don't need to get it. But the whole reason for this lockdown order is because, there's a large percentage of folks that are asymptomatic. I mean, in this room, 1 or 2 or all of us could have it and just not show any symptoms because we're young and reasonably healthy. But we can still give it to other people.
You think you and I are young, huh?
This is radio, right? I can say whatever I want.
You already gave yourself up. You've been in law enforcement 30 years.
True. They're dog years. So, I mean, the whole thing is, but I could have it right now and go visit my folks or go visit one of these parties and give it to everybody who might be more vulnerable or not go to the hospital as soon as they should and develop more severe symptoms. So I mean, my folks kind of sent us all an email before all the lockdown and said, "Hey, we're gonna self quarantine for a couple weeks just to be safe." And I thought, okay, whatever, crazy old people. But it turns out they were kind of ahead of the curve. And then these orders came out, and I thought, yeah, that's pretty darn smart. So that's kind of where we're at. It's we're trying to save the more vulnerable among us, and even some unvulnerable people, unvulnerable in quotation marks, have come down with very serious symptoms and even fatal outcomes.
So that person's neighbor is like the person you pull over that has drugs on him and says, "These aren't my drugs."
With expired
No.
registration.
Yeah, exactly.
They don't say these aren't my drugs. They say these aren't my pants.
Yeah.
So this person was dumb enough to have a party, but he was smart enough to make sure everyone was 6 feet apart in the house. Liar.
So you just don't believe him?
Liar. Do not be the liar.
I will say, though, I mean, even though the host may not have, he may be lying about keeping people 6 feet apart, but I kind of see most people doing that on their own, right? So even, if I'm at the supermarket or something, I'm just kind of, it's like a natural thing. Mm-hmm. So
but in your house at a party, I don't believe him.
You just don't. What if Don? You've been to my house. It's a big open house.
Yeah.
If there were 10 of them and they were literally staying, right? Couples can stand next to each other, and you're like yelling across the room. Are you still of the mindset, Don? This is just dumb because of the droplets and the airborne.
It's not
And it's not. You're just not going to buy that it's
out
happening.
in public. Yes, in the house.
I'm no
They're
mathematician,
just saying that.
but I think they'd have to be in a circle to be the closest, right? So 6 feet, 6
Right.
points on the. They have to be in a circle. Otherwise, yeah, you couldn't have it linearly, or you'd be out in the yard.
Liar face.
Hello,
Yeah.
John. Good morning. Take it. Go ahead, John.
My question is for Sheriff Jones.
Yeah.
I'm a concealed carry holder, and my license expires in May. With the shelter in place in the limited gatherings, are we allowed like a grace period to renew our license, or do we just have to renew it? Just try and deal with it.
We're getting a lot of CCW emails.
Yeah,
as well.
that's a question we get a lot on social media as well, both my personal Facebook and the department Facebook. And yes, we are going to extend the grace period for renewals because we're not keeping those. We're not doing those appointments.